spring2014153030. How many of us remember being like 10 years old and your friends, you come to your birthday party or whatever, and they get you a yo-yo and you open it up and you're like, what is this good for? But you're like, yeah, thanks, this was fantastic, thank you. And you open it up and you drop it and it sleeps for a second and you bring it back up and you're like, okay, that's kind of cool. I'm going to hang on to that for a little while and whatever happens with it happens. Well, I'm going to kind of bring back some of that and kind of explain what the yo-yo is. The yo-yo's origin. The yo-yo is believed to come out of China. We really don't have a whole lot of proof. We're just pretty sure that's where it came from. The first recorded proof we have comes from 500 BC out of Greece. The yo-yo was not actually a toy, though. It was actually a gift that the children would bring, and they would give as gifts to the gods. And it actually looks something like that, which doesn't look anything like what we know today. The yo-yo came to the United States somewhere around 1866. The reference was made by two men in Ohio, and it wasn't actually called a yo-yo to begin with. They took the pattern, and they patented it and redesigned it, and they called it the improved bandolore. Bandolore was the original name for the yo-yo coming out of Europe. Later, a German immigrant patented his own design and called it the return wheel, which doesn't, I guess that makes sense. This is a yo-yo from today, by the way. This is actually one of mine. And I'll pass that around probably at the end. The original world's #1 yo-yo. How many people have picked up a yo-yo and seen that set on it? Okay, that's like the #1 saying from Duncan. In 1928, Donald F. Duncan Sr. was a businessman, saw his first yo-yo at a convention. Some guy was sitting there doing it, and he was like, oh, that's really awesome. So he bought the yo-yo and bought into the guy's business and became the Duncan Toy Company, which everybody's familiar with. And that is the yo-yo probably everyone's seen and familiar with, the Duncan butterfly, which if we all remember being in elementary school, they came to visit the school and they showed you and they were like, buy one of our yo-yos. And it was like $6, $7. I was one of those kids that didn't get to buy one. I wasn't happy. I was really upset. Yo-yoing today. There are 5 different types of yo-yoing, which sounds kind of ridiculous, but there is. There's 1A, which is what this is. And 1A is actually for string tricks, which, if you understand what that means, I'll demonstrate that really quick. Yeah, remember that, walking the dog? You drop your yo-yo and you're like, oh my gosh, I can walk the dog, or I can do the around the world. Well, that's all pretty lame when you get to a more advanced level, which is,
wow, you're good.
Stuff like that.
Wow.
And this yo-yo actually is called an unresponsive yo-yo, which means it doesn't return unless you can do a trick called a bind. So it just sleeps. Let's see if I can get it. So that doesn't do anything. No. So that's some really basic string tricks, and that's the only way you get it to come back up. Next we have 2A, which is like what everyone's familiar with, which is the looping yo-yo. And that's that shape where it's like circular kind of, and it just goes down, sleeps for a minute, it comes back up. Do a little tug wrist, you can do it out and loop it. I actually don't have a looping yo-yo with me today. Then you get a 3A, which is when you use 2 yo-yos like this and do string tricks with both hands, and that's really, really difficult, and I can't begin to do it. Then we have 4A, which is kind of like, you guys ever seen the Diablos on the sticks? You know those? People have the sticks and they're throwing it in the air, and they're like, oh yeah, it kind of looks like a yo-yo, but it's like this huge. That's kind of like off-string yo-yoing. You throw it and you catch on the string, and it's pretty ridiculous. And then you get into 5A, which is freehand yo-yoing, and there's a counterweight where you put your finger in it, and it's like they use like a dice or an eraser or something, just like a little round rubber piece. And that way the yo-yo's not attached to their hand, and when they throw it, they can do different tricks with the dice on the other end, and use it as a counterweight to throw it around. There are also 3 types of yo-yos. There's a butterfly yo-yo, which is this one. This is it's like a kind of a different type of butterfly shape. imperial shape, which is pretty much what you guys are used to seeing, and then there's a modified shape, which is kind of a combination, but it looks more like the original yo-yo, kind of pancaked out, and that's what those look like. Modern yo-yos. Today we got several different shapes, mostly based off the butterfly shape. There's a wide, this one's kind of rounded, and they've got some with like metal rings, and I mean this is plastic, but most of them today are made of aluminum. This one's actually a polyurethane. And they get made into aluminum, and they go anywhere from like, this was like $30 to like $400, and usually those are made of magnesium. Also, there are different size shapes and bearings. Like this one has a concave bearing, so the bearing actually shapes like this, so the string will sit more centered. Also, every year there's a yo-yo competition all across the world. It starts off with just preliminary rounds like we do with anything, goes to a national round, and then we go into a world competition every single year. And I got all my information about the beginning of the yo-yo from Spintastics. If you guys want to see any more tricks, I'd be happy to do some.
Yeah, do some, bro.
All right.
This yo-yo is actually called, it's actually got 3 bearings in it, so just one that sits in the center, so I can do stuff like that. It'll sit on your thigh.
Cool.
You can use pretty cool stuff, man. And I'll stop there.